What's up, y'all? TBrown31 here with JaboctheGreat. Welcome back to the last word. We got our picks for this weekend. Big weekend in football. Of course, Thanksgiving. Got games all the way from Thursday through Monday. So we're going to talk about the biggest ones this week, starting with probably the only good Thursday night football, or Thursday game, I should say, Thanksgiving Day tomorrow. Dolphins Packers. So Packers are coming off a win up against the Niners. That was a huge one. Dolphins have won their last three. I would still go with the Packers in this one. Look, I think without Brock Purdy in that last game, Niners looked pretty awful for a lot of it. But the Packers are still a pretty good team. And with all due respect to the Dolphins, they've been pretty good since Tua came back. Their one loss to the Bills. Not the best competition in the world. Playing the Raiders, playing the Patriots, the past couple of weeks, they put up points against them. I think the Dolphins will still score, but right now I still think Packers are a better team, so picking them to win.
Yeah, I think for me this just comes down to the way the Packers have been playing. Obviously, you didn't play against Brock Purdy last week, but they still put up 38 points. No Bosa either there, but I think the Packers that have just been on a little bit more of a roll. I think their offense is a little bit more put together. The defense has been pretty strong. Their last loss and one of their only losses in recent weeks is against the Lions, whereas the Dolphins definitely lost to two good teams, Bills and Cardinals with Tua there, but I think the Dolphins will look better. I think they've been on a roll. Tua has looked really good since coming back from the concussion. I just feel like they're not quite ready to go up against this Packers team that I feel like has seen a lot of adversity and has survived a lot. And maybe an underrated thing to point out here, but it's going to be really cold in Green Bay when this game happens. And for the past few years in the Mike McDaniel era, the Dolphins have not played good football when it's cold
That's
outside.
true.
So I would like the Dolphins to win this game, but I feel like the Packers are just going to get the edge. Probably like a 1 to 2 point victory. Should be a good game. I hope it's a great game on Thanksgiving evening.
Now, a game that I don't know about, to be honest with you, speaking of good games, Chiefs, Raiders. I think the NFL booked this on Black Friday exclusively because of the Christmas game last year where the Raiders upset the Chiefs. And being Panther fans, we both saw last week's game against the Chiefs. Like, Panthers definitely could have won that one. With that being said, like Raiders, I don't see a chance of that happening. I mean, the spread's 13 points in this one. I'd probably give them, they'll probably lose by 10, I would say. But yeah, I don't think the Raiders will have a realistic chance in this one. Chiefs definitely coming out with a little bit of a chip on their shoulder now the past couple weeks. So definitely should be easy dub for the Chiefs.
Yeah, I mean the Raiders have lost 5 straight. They lost to the Panthers as well early in the season. They beat the Ravens, which is a crazy turn of events. Does not feel like that is real anymore. They've got a lot going on. Gardner Minshew also just broke his collarbone, so that's out. That's done. Um, Chiefs looked human the past few weeks, right? I mean, they've looked human all season. They've been beatable in every game, and they played the Raiders close last time. It was 27-20, but this one just feels like I don't know. You almost get beat by Bryce Young after you lost to the Bills, and after you almost lost to the Broncos. It feels like the Raiders are going to get beat down on this one. The Chiefs will probably have one of their few, I think, big convincing wins. They had one against the Saints. I would like to, for fun, say that the Raiders can steal this one, but I just can't see a pathway where that happens. I mean, Jacoby Myers and Madison might have some nice performances, but I think the Chiefs are going to take this one pretty handedly.
Yeah, so that's that big Black Friday matchup. Maybe it'll be something, but I'm not sure. Moving to the game though, the game, Ohio State and Michigan. We've been wrong pretty much every year the past 3 years since Michigan's been winning three straight of these, but I think finally Ohio State will get their get back, beat Michigan once again as they did for almost 10 straight years. Like Michigan, look, they had a pretty big win last week against Northwestern, but they've been shaky pretty much all season. They just got bowl eligibility last week with that win. I just do not see them coming out and winning this one. If Ohio State, as long as they don't mess around with it, don't make any stupid mistakes, don't have any turnovers, like they'll be fine. This should be a pretty easy win, I think, in this rivalry on Saturday.
State had their classic, struggle battle with Penn State, and then they beat up Purdue, beat up Northwestern, beat up Indiana. I think this one's going to go probably the same way. I mean, you got the heat of the rivalry here with Michigan and Ohio State, but I feel like this one should be an easy victory. And I mean, shout out to Michigan for getting that big win last week against Northwestern. But this is a kind of a funny and not necessary thing to entirely point out. But when I first started playing CFB 25, I decided to be a quarterback. I got signed by Northwestern. That team is horrible. That was the hardest season I think I've played of a football game, trying to be the starting quarterback for Northwestern. So not the largest accomplishment there. If Ohio State loses to this Michigan team, that'd be crazy as a Clemson fan, which is a good segue here to our next game. But I would like that for sure because it would definitely open up some space for us. But there's just no way in my mind that Michigan's able to steal this one. A great program that just isn't going to have a great year this year. I think that's okay. We can sweep this one under the rug, and we'll come back to this one next year.
Yeah, so getting to that Clemson game, and I understand, Carolina, they came in off that big win, I should say, against Tennessee a couple years ago into beating Clemson. But I think this is the first time in probably 10 years that this game really has some meaning. Both teams are in the top 15 of these latest rankings. Clemson's 12, Carolina's 15. A lot of talk about whether Carolina can make the playoffs, possibly. They got some issues. They still have 3 losses right now. Clemson only has 2. With that being said, I think Carolina definitely has a big chance to win this one. I'm picking them, not a homer pick, just legitimately I think they can win this one. They've been playing their best ball of the season. It's not even close. I mean, huge win against Oklahoma, Texas A&M, Vanderbilt, and a tight game against Missouri. Obviously Wofford, both teams, they didn't play anybody last week, set it on Wofford, that's a throwaway. But Clemson on the other side, they've been playing better. Obviously, they had the Louisville loss, but I think the key here is, turnovers. If Cade Klubnik, if he's playing as well as he did, the past 2 months for the most part, Carolina's going to have some problems. But I think Carolina's got to come out there, be strong on the front side like they have been all season, play some good defense, run the ball well. Lenore Sellers, Jesus Christ. If Lenore Sellers can maybe look like Lamar Jackson out there, then, maybe they'll have a good chance of winning this one. So I'll pick them. But I think this is definitely going to be probably the best game of the weekend and the toughest matchup overall.
Yeah, maybe a little biased from me, but this is the game I'm most excited for this weekend. Obviously, we've talked about our histories here. Both of us attended each of these universities. I'm finishing up at Clemson for grad school anyway, so it's been great. This has been a great matchup since I've been a student here. We've had our back and forth moments, including I watched Spencer Rattler end our home streak live, which was not the most enjoyable thing. This one I'm going to pick Clemson. And it's a little bit of being a homer, but I also just, after the Louisville loss, we played a weird game against Virginia Tech and kind of a too close game against Pittsburgh. But I feel like in both of those games, there was moments where Cade Klubnik really played super, super well. And I think that he and Lenore Sellers are both very good quarterbacks that have very low moments at certain parts of the season. And I think that, peak for peak here, just at this current year, Sellers is probably going to end up being the better quarterback. But I feel like if Klubnik and the offense can just come out and play, Clemson's style of football, let Moffa run the ball, let Klubnik sling it, let him run the ball. I think we'll be set up for success here. I don't think this is going to be a blowout either way. Obviously, these two teams are both coming off of blowouts, but they played Wofford and the Citadel. So I mean, it's that's just kind of what it is. So I can see this one going, like a 28 to 25, maybe even a 28-35. Just all touchdowns. If it comes down to field goals, Clemson might be cooked. We have some issues getting our field goals through. Or past the blocker. So I'm a little worried about the special teams aspect. I hope we can just play drive for drive, score for score. Clemson comes on top of a shootout. That'd be great. It'll be in Memorial Stadium. I will not be at this one this time. I think maybe I'll enjoy this one from home. But this should be a great game. This is always, we're South Carolina residents, so this is always kind of the biggest game of the year. But this one feels this week like it's the biggest game of the weekend. Top 15 matchup. Both these teams have a lot on the line here. It could be big with a win. A loss is probably it for either one of these guys. So I'm excited to see this one. I'm going to go with Clemson. I definitely am more worried than I have been in previous years about our chances to beat y'all this year. But I'm going to take Clemson in this one, somewhat being a homer and somewhat just finally placing my faith on Cade Klubnik, despite being critical of him for the past few years.
Yeah, that's fair, man. Definitely going to be probably my favorite matchup of the weekend. And speaking of another rivalry that hasn't been played in over 10 years now, Texas and Texas A&M. Look, I mean, both these teams I kind of feel weird about. We're going to go with Texas in this one, but A&M, they're coming off of that 4 overtime loss to Auburn. A couple weeks before that, they lost to Carolina, as I mentioned. You know, beating New Mexico State, in between that, but not having their greatest couple weeks after having that huge win against LSU. Texas, on the other hand, I was singing their praises. We both were, after we've been criticizing them for years now. We were both singing their praises early in the season. But to be fair here, like when you look at their season in totality, most of their wins, basically have come against the bottom half of the SEC. The one big time SEC game that they've played, Georgia, they got whooped. So while I think Texas is going to come out and win this one, I'd say, it's going to be tight, but I don't want to say it's going to be a blowout, but I think it'll be probably a, 7 to 10 point victory, I would say. I'm just wondering how Texas is going to look in their inevitable matchup against Georgia in the SEC title game.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. I feel the same. I feel like I'm looking more past this game than I am at this game. Like
Yeah.
I kind of expect Texas to fight a battle in this one. A&M has not been like horrible in any of their their losses. Maybe the first loss, but South Carolina was definitely bad for them. But it got out of hand really quickly at a certain moment. I feel like they can fight Texas well in this, but I think Texas is probably going to take this by a touchdown, maybe a 10-point swing here. They've been on a roll since their loss to Georgia, which makes you that they had a little scared with Vanderbilt, then they hit a roll. That makes you think, they're going to probably match up with Georgia again, and how would that look? It did not go very well at all last time, so it's very interesting to me to kind of see, can they get past A&M and keep themselves afloat for that matchup, and then see where they can go from there. So I think, Quinn Ewers and Marcel Reed are in for a fun little shootout here, a great little duel, but I think Ewers will probably come out on top. A&M just has been so shaky, so I think it'll be a fun matchup. It's crazy to me that this is the night game and we got the noon game, but I think it'll be fun either way down there at College Station. So, but I do think Ewers and company will come out on top of this one.
Yeah, you know what it is, man. I mean, they haven't played in like 12, 13 years now since, that first set of realignment 10 years ago. So it is what it is. Definitely still excited for our game. And we're going to move to NFL Sunday. And with the Vikings Cardinals game, me personally, I'm just going to speak personally here. We're both picking the Vikings, but I'm picking the Vikings purely out of hatred for the Cardinals and what they did to us last week by putting up 6 points against the Seahawks. I mean, we picked them. We were like, all right, Cardinals on a roll, and that's what they do. And I know the Seahawks are a tough team to kind of play against. We said that last week, but if you think you're going to put up 6 points and then come back the next week and try to beat the Vikings, it ain't going to happen. And I know the Vikings, tough game against Tennessee, low scoring game against Jacksonville, OT game, which they maybe should have lost to the Bears. I get that. But at the absolute best, the Vikings are still one of the better teams in the NFL. I think that's going to show. Obviously, the Cardinals are going to score more than 6 points, I would think. But that defense for the Vikings is still pretty good. And it has been for the last few weeks, outside of the Chicago game. So at the end of the day, Cardinals just kind of disappointed me, and maybe they just weren't as good as we thought they were. So that's why I'm picking the Vikings.
I just it's got to be like a nightmare scenario to be a Cardinals player right now and then put up 6 points against the Seahawks defense, which is not bad, but like, it's not up there. And then you have to play the Vikings next. Like, I just can't. Obviously, the Vikings defense has faltered a little bit. They just allowed 30 from Caleb Williams, who has had flashes of being very good this season. The Bears have had a rocky time, but I think I agree. I think I would naturally pick the Vikings in this one. Offense is a little better. I know this is speaking for the two of us in two different fantasy leagues here, but I could have used a little more out of Justin Jefferson last week, but that is what it is.
Oh, me too.
But I couldn't believe my eyes to see that the Cardinals scored six points against Seattle. And I don't think Seattle's a bad team. It's more so that game was just so low scoring. I figured they'd be a little bit more of a battle, and I think that the Vikings did a similar thing against Jacksonville when they had that 12-7 victory. Very, very weird. But since then, they put up 23, they put up 30. Before that, they were pretty high rolling. Even in their loss to the Rams, they got 20 points out of it and probably could have had more. Got a little robbed at the end there. So I just feel like the Cardinals are not set up for a good scenario here. I think Sam Darnold and Aaron Jones and Jefferson, and now they've got Hawkinson back. I feel like everything is going to set up to kind of take the Cardinals down in this one. And to be honest, I wasn't a hater before, but now I think they deserve it. So I am going to go with the Vikings in this one too.
Yeah, now we're gonna move to the game of the week though. We got Eagles Ravens. So Eagles 9-2, Ravens 8-4, coming off that win against the Chargers in Harbaugh Bowl number 3, Monday Night Football. You pointed this out. The Baltimore Ravens are actually favorites in this one. I was kind of surprised. I figured Philly would be, and we're gonna split here. I'm picking Philly in this one. And look, I'm not gonna say that they, the Ravens won because J.K. Dobbins went down. But I will say, like early on, man, like he was rolling, and by the end of the game, they finished with 83 yards rushing. J.K. Dobbins had 6 carries, and he had 40 of those yards. So, like he literally was, much of the offense early on, and kind of once he went out, things kind of changed. Ravens put more on it. Like we saw more of what we expected from the Ravens, and I still just think, at the end of the day, man, like that Steelers loss just still kind of bothers me. What I saw from them, like I'm just not sure like how consistent they can be. And the Eagles have been one of the more a month and a half, 2 months now since their bye. So I still think at their absolute best, the Eagles should win this one. But I would definitely say probably going to be 27-24 Eagles.
Yeah, it's a good score prediction. I think that for me, this was the hardest game to pick. I feel like the Eagles scream like they're the right answer, right? Like the Ravens were really really tested by J.K. Dobbins until he went down. Saquon Barkley has been on a tear. He's been getting a lot of MVP talks alongside Derrick Henry. And to me, I just feel like it's going to come down to being a shootout because I see no way that the Ravens defense stops anything coming from the Eagles. It just doesn't feel like that's going to happen. They've not been
Yeah.
very good this season, and I think the Eagles have strengths that completely counter the Ravens defense. Like few weaknesses there. So I think that's a problem. On the other hand, I feel like Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry are going to come into this game with some chips on the shoulder, right? I think they've been pretty high up in the MVP talks, and then recently, after the Eagles got beat up by the Buccaneers, they turned it around and have been on a tear. And now people are turning their eye to Josh Allen and Saquon Barkley, and I think the Ravens know that they've really got to get one of these big wins under their belt, right? Some of their bigger wins this year include both wins against the Bengals, which most people have seen like, hey, you guys could have easily lost those games. They beat up the Broncos, and that looks a little better now as the Broncos have surged, but there's going to be, injury question marks. And the Chargers won. They lost to the Browns. They lost to the Steelers. So I think they really got to get one of these. And not that the Eagles don't, equally need this win to keep themselves on a roll. But there's a gap now between them and Washington. And I don't think they're not going to want it. But I just feel like the Ravens are going to come in a little hungrier. I think Derrick Henry is really going to have a chip on his shoulder here, facing up against Saquon, who has overtaken him in rushing yards, and is maybe pushing against some of the MVP talks for Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry. So I think this will be a great football game. As far as the NFL goes this weekend, this will probably be the best game that we get NFL wise. So I think it's going to be fun. I will be seated, and I do hope that I'm correct on this pick, but I don't really have anything against the Eagles here. I just want I've had a tough battle with the Ravens this season on picking for or against them. So
Yeah.
I'm going to hope that I get this one correct.
Yeah, so for our last game, which is a game that should have theoretically been the best game of the week, we got the
Yeah.
Niners and the Bills. Niners might be cooked, and the only reason they have a chance still, I think, is because the division is still a little weird. I mean, you got Seattle and Arizona 6-5, and then they're sitting where they're with the Rams at 5-6. So anybody can still win the division, but I think it's just gonna be a one team in the playoff kind of division this year. Niners right now, I mean, they had that bad loss to the Packers last week. I know without Brock Purdy, without Nick Bosa. They got more injuries, of course, the guys that have been out before. Even with, Purdy back in now, I just don't think the Niners have it right now. Um, Bills, they're obviously playing their best ball this season. I mean, they have been on a tear. They've won their last 6 games in a row now, I think. So they've been great. Had that loss or had that win against the Chiefs a couple weeks ago. Riding high for that. I don't think they'll, overlook the Niners even with all the injuries. Then they'll come out, have another great performance. Josh Allen does his thing. They get the dub.
Yeah, the Niners are trending downward, and that's a tough thing to see for this team that has so many good pieces, kind of in and out of football this year. Uh, and the Bills have done nothing but trend upward since their last loss, which is feels like ancient history at this point, getting beat up by the Ravens and whatnot. The Niners have just not been super great. I mean, obviously last week did not go well. They had a lot of injuries, but the Bills have been on a roll. They beat the Chiefs. They beat the Dolphins with Tua back, and Tua gave them a big fight. They crushed the Geno Smith Seahawks. While the Seahawks were still kind of in that area where they were maybe just going to get it back together. And you're going to play this one in New York in the snow up there at Highmark Stadium. I think this one, everything kind of goes the Bills' way. They know what they're doing with these big snow games. They're just a lot more consistent on offense. Their defense is a little more healthy and retooled and ready to go. I just feel like the Niners this should have been kind of like the marquee matchup, but unfortunately, the Niners have entered this week coming in on a very disappointed kind of bubble of football. I mean, I think they just have not been super impressive offensively, super impressive defensively. They got a lot of injuries. Even when they've got those, their most impressive win is probably beating the Cowboys with half their team alive. But that's just I think they hate the Cowboys, so I think that's probably it. So this one should be it has the I think upward chance to be a good game, but I do feel like if it really starts to come down in the snow, that the Bills are just going to have Allen and Cook run all over them, and that'll probably be it for the Niners in this one.